Hi, welcome to the Awakening series. My name is Kimberly Archuleta. Today we have an amazing guest. This is Rusty Frasier. He is a TM practitioner, and I'm just so excited to have him on the show. Rusty, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks,
Thank
Kimberly.
Thank you. Well, let's get started. If you can give us some insight on where TM came from.
Yeah, TM, there are a lot of things today called meditation. And some of them have come from the Buddhist tradition, which goes back several hundred years, of course. But TM comes from the Vedic tradition. And this technique can be physically traced back 10,000 years. They have found two cities underwater off the coast of India, carbon dated 10,000 years old. And I'm not talking coastal villages. I'm talking about civilized, large 2 miles, 1 mile by 2 mile wide cities. And these, you can tell by the architecture and the artifacts that these cities were Vedic civilizations. They knew this knowledge, and this knowledge has been passed down. It comes and goes in the world, but it's been kept alive by a long tradition of teachers who have resided in the Himalayas. The great teachers come and go. The last great teacher, we call Gurudev, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, was actually the Shankaracharya, or the head, the head of all the spiritual aspect of India. They had not had one of those for 300 years. It's not like they have to fill this post. It's when somebody comes along who's worthy of it. And we call him Gurudev, which means dear teacher. And Gurudev was the one actually who started revival of this knowledge for the rest of us who live down off the Himalayas. So early 50s, or actually before that, Maharishi, who many of you know, who's the one who brought TM to the West. Maharishi was finishing up his master's degree in physics. Most people don't know he had a master's in physics. And so his uncle arranged a meeting with Gurudev, and Maharishi went to see him and knew right away he wanted to be with him. So he said, "Can I come and be with you?" And Gurudev said, "Finish your degree first and then come and be with me." And he did. And then he was given the task of spreading this knowledge to the world. And so Gurudev died in 1953. And about a year or so after that, Maharishi started just walking. He walked down out of the Himalayas into the south of India. A guy came up to him and said, "Hey, do you speak?" And Maharishi thought, yes, he's asking me, am I in a vow of silence? So he said, "Sure, I speak, yeah." And so a few days later, the guy came back and said, "I've arranged for you to speak 5 days at the library." So he was talking about a different kind of speech. But anyway, Maharishi said, "Okay, I will." And then that sparked the whole worldwide movement of TM. I mean, TM is now in 108 countries. Millions and millions of people have learned TM over time. And so it has its influence on society as a whole, as well as the individual. So that's how TM came about. I mean, we have a university now, full-fledged. It started in 1973, fully accredited through the doctoral level, so forth.
That's amazing. Wow, that's a wonderful lineage. And I'm so glad he brought it to the West. So thankful. Yes. I mean, as are so many people. So what makes TM different than other meditations?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because people lump all meditations, into the same pot. They're definitely not. The main difference in TM is that we don't try to meditate. So we don't control the mind, try to resist thoughts, or try to still the mind. We don't control the body, try to keep the body in the pretzel position. I used to do that stuff a long time ago, and it's really hard on the knees to sit there for an hour, with your. But TM is done 20 minutes twice a day. So it's not intrusive into your schedule. You can meditate any place. I've meditated in ballparks, just anywhere, on airplane, in the airport. Just you can meditate anywhere because noise is not a factor. Thoughts are not a factor. It's really, really very easy. And so just to give you an idea of what is going on, I'm going to bring up a slide to show you the differences in the different aspects of TM. Okay, this slide shows about 10 years ago, there were so many meditations out there that the researchers said, well, if they're not all alike, how are they different? So they were able to classify all of the meditations into 3 groups. One of them is the top, which is focused attention, or we would call concentration. And then the second one, open monitoring or contemplation, or guided meditation would be one example of that. Then the third one is automatic self-transcending, and that's TM. It's the only one in that group. So TM, even physiologically, is different than the others. So you can see how intense the effort, mental effort that takes to do the techniques, like concentration. If you've ever tried concentrating, you know that you have to constantly fight the mind. The mind wants to wander. And we'll get back to that in a minute. But so concentration takes a lot of energy, and you can see how active how active the mind is. The open monitoring is more like daydreaming. A lot of people want to get in that free floating state. You can be very creative in that state and so forth. Guided meditation, beautiful place, waterfall, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not something unusual. It happens all the time when we are sitting there daydreaming. Where does it take us? It has its use if you want to think out of the box. But TM is so different. You can see it right here in the waves. It has high amplitude alpha 1, and it's coherent. If you could see all of these lines in there, each one is a point where the brain wave is taken, and you can see how the brain works together. This slide actually shows a little bit better. The one on the left shows just what happens with your eyes closed. And when your eyes are closed, the part in the back of the brain, the occipital area can relax. And so there's a little more coherence there, a little more in the prefrontal cortex. But if you look at the right side, during TM, the lines between the dots are where the brain waves are taken. And the lines between the dots, there's a line if those 2 parts are working together 80% of the time or more. So the computer puts all this together. And you can see the huge change and the huge coherence between the 2 hemispheres of the brain and the front and the back of the brain. And this is important because coherence is associated with all kinds of good things in life. Creativity, happiness, et cetera, et cetera. So I will get out of this and we'll stop sharing. Just to give you an idea how TM is different.
How that's beautiful. And I love going into the different waves and whether you're concentrating or you're not. And I've done all 3, I believe. I've done all 3 of those. And with TM, it's so much different. It's so much different. And I feel so much more rested. How does TM work? If we can go into a little bit more detail on that.
Sure. Yeah. Again, what's different? And the way TM works basically is it does not fight the natural tendencies of the mind. It uses the natural tendency of the mind. What is that? The mind, if you look at the mind, is kind of an ocean. On top of the ocean is the conscious thinking mind. even the barely conscious thinking mind, where we're having all these barely subconscious thoughts going on and perceiving and so forth. All of those would be like waves on the ocean. The mind's in constant motion. And a lot of people think that's bad and you have to stop that. In fact, some people use the derogatory term monkey mind, that the mind is like a monkey jumping around all the time. You have to control it. So we would say, Maharishi actually said, no, 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 you don't have to control the mind. First of all, let's see why the mind's in constant motion. And the reason the mind's in constant motion is it's always seeking a field of greater happiness. It's always looking for more happiness, more fulfillment, more creativity, always looking for more. That is the force of evolution expressing itself in humans. So if you want to try to control that, it's you against the force of evolution. Who's going to win that battle? Right? So what do? We utilize that force. And the way we do that is we use a special thought. See, all thoughts are outward directed, right? They're all either outward directed toward building concepts or even action or speech. We have some special thoughts. We use a mantra. I mean, everybody's heard of mantra, right? There are thousands of them. However, there are only about a handful of mantras that do what we want them to do. And what we need for them to do is to allow the mind to go within. So these mantras have three basic qualities. One is that they don't have a meaning, because if they had a meaning, then the mind would be dwelling on the meaning. Secondly, they're very pleasing. So the mind likes to play with them. They're like a fuzzy ball for the mind, right? You have one, right?
Absolutely.
It's like a fuzzy ball
That's
for the
very
mind.
nice.
And so the third thing is the more the mind entertains these thoughts, the less developed they become. They actually go toward the source of thinking rather than away from the source of thinking. And it happens effortlessly. Why? Because the mind wants to move toward happiness. And once the mind knows that the source of happiness is deep within the self, then all you have to do is have the intention, and it works. Exactly like having the intention to fall asleep at night. It works by itself. So, but the mind has to be guided to that area in the first place. And that's why TM has to be taught one-on-one, because everybody's different. And so I'm a TM teacher, and have been so since 1970, last century. We won't go into that, okay? But the mind has to be guided to transcend. And once we guide the mind to transcend 2 or 3 times, then you got it, game over. It's just effortless from that point on, because that's what the mind wants to do. That's why it's so easy.
Absolutely.
So that's why that's how it works.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Rusty. I remember being at you and your wife's home, your beautiful home, and meditating with a group, as we did pre-COVID. And basically, I remember a woman asking you why we, do this twice a day. And I was able to respond, and basically stated that, like, when you brush your teeth, you have to do that twice, because you basically brush off the remnants of, your dreams, and just get into a great state before you start your day. And then towards the end of the day, or even in the middle, you're kind of like refreshing once again. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, exactly right. I'm glad you did that, because that is a really good analogy. Yes, when we wake up in the morning, we meditate. Now, what TM does is it allows the mind to go within. However, mind and body are linked, right? So they're linked together. So and both are active. When you sit down to meditate, the mind starts to settle down here, and it drags the body down with it. So the mind and the body are going deep. What that allows the body to do is to get rid of that deep stress that we've been building up since we were children. Children are just naturally happy unless something specific gets in the way, but then they're naturally happy. Why? Because they're more in touch with that source of self. So over the years, though, we build up these deep stresses. Sleep is not deep enough to get rid of them, but sleep gets rid of fatigue. So we wake up in the morning, the body's gotten rid of a lot of fatigue. We dive deep within to do our TM for 20 minutes or so. And that allows the body to get rid of the deep stresses. So it gets rid of those deep stresses. That allows the nervous system to maintain that deep quietness, that happiness, that bliss. But it fades during the day, just like brushing your teeth. You eat lunch, you chew some gum, or you have a Tic Tac, and it just starts to gum up the mouth again. So you need to brush them in the afternoon, and then you feel, nice pearly whites the rest of the night. And so that's the same way with TM. We dive deep, we get rid of stress, we pick up fatigue during the day, and then we dive deep in the afternoon, and we reclaim the evening. Most people don't even realize after they start meditating that the evening where they used to just vegetate, now they're actually sharp enough to get things done. So you gain time in the evening.
I love that.
Yeah.
Kind of going to the Beatles. I know they were very big into TM, and I think they met Maharishi quite a few times. I kind of will tailor this to the question, why do people get all the results we have read about, like with the Beatles and how they came up with their songs? And I mean, I personally, I had an epiphany while I was meditating, and because of this epiphany, I started a third company that I believe is going to be extremely successful, but it was while I was meditating. If you can give us an
insight. Yes. And you can have, now we don't pay much attention to thoughts generally, but sometimes it's possible to get flashes. I'm a software engineer, and I would sometimes whole algorithms would break into my head, If you get those things, you don't have to worry about them, because after you meditate, you always look at them again and say, well, was that just a release of stress, or was that really valid? And so then if it's valid, you act on it. But it's very interesting how it changes your creativity and changes your life, because you mentioned the Beatles. The Beatles were really one of the big contributors to the worldwide TM movement. They kind of launched Maharishi into the worldwide stage in the mid-60s. And you can even see sometime, if you have a picture, you maybe could show it to everybody sometime. The Beatles were in India with Maharishi. They all learned TM. And when they went to India, they stayed there some time. They started writing songs. Almost all, about 80% of the White Album was written in India. If you look at the difference between the music before they learned TM and after they learned TM, I mean, I Want to Hold Your Hand versus Sgt. Pepper.
Right.
So, and they wrote several songs about Maharishi and TM. You kind of have to know that's what they're about, but they did. So they are really responsible for bringing a lot of that, and the two remaining Beatles still come out and talk about TM a lot. They'll come to fundraisers and so forth. So Paul and Ringo.
There's so many, like Oprah and Russell Brand, and one of my favorite comedians, Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, he not only produced Seinfeld, he starred in it. So like, I think he attributes that to TM.
Yes, he does. He would meditate at lunch because he got up so early and meditated at lunch. He didn't think you needed to do it twice a day. So he would meditate once a day at lunch while everybody else was doing that. And later on, when his son started, a friend of mine who taught him said, Jerry, you really ought to meditate twice a day. That's really important to get that. He said, you can do that? I didn't know you could do that, because he learned in college, right? So he thought, God, in college, you get up about 5 minutes before class. Or maybe you get up when you should be at class. So, why do I want to meditate in the morning? But he said if he hadn't been meditating twice a day, Seinfeld would still be on the air.
Wow.
So once he started twice a day, he started his new projects like Comedians and Cars Going for Coffee and things like that. And that reminds me, Howard Stern is another longtime meditator. And there is one of those Jerry Seinfeld episodes on comedians in cars going for coffee with Howard Stern. And they're sitting in Midtown Cafe somewhere. And they're talking about their experiences with TM. Both of them learned about the same time in college. And it really changed their life. So Howard Stern says TM saved his mother's life. It's a great story if you want to look
I'm
that
gonna
up.
have to research that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do want to know a little bit more about your journey and why you became a practitioner.
Well, my wife and I were married, and don't tell her this. I told you this. I'll have to make sure she doesn't watch this part. We were married in May of '69 and learned TM in August of '69 and knew right away we wanted to be TM teachers. Now, we were living in Boston at the time, and in the '60s in Boston, I mean, the '60s, every street corner had a guru on it. You know, actually had a drug dealer on it too, but sometimes the same person. But anyway, so, you know, everybody was trying all kinds of things. So we tried all kinds of meditation. Nothing really, I mean, you get excited about it for a few weeks and then, you know, it slips away. It gets hard to do. And it just didn't seem to be doing a whole lot. But, you know, you want it to work. And then you say, oh, well, let's try this one. Somebody says, oh, you should try this one. So you jump around, you do all these things. And so we were on Nantucket one time, and the TM teacher from Boston came through and gave an intro lecture. And we knew right away we wanted to learn TM. So we went into Boston, learned TM in August of '69, and knew right away. I mean, I wanted to do it because I wanted to be able to teach my children, just in case. That was my reason. But once you learn, we went through months of training with Maharishi in 1970. First section was in Maine. The second section was actually in Colorado here at Estes Park, YMCA of the Rockies. It was the only teacher training course he ever gave in the US. Wonderful place, wonderful course. But then came here in went back home and then came here in 1971 to become to run the center here, and taught TM full-time for 7.5 years until our first one came along and I actually had to go to work to support a family. And then retired in 2000, sold the company and wanted to teach full-time. And my wife retired from being a school teacher for about 100 years. And then so we've been doing that full-time she's been teaching with me full-time again for about 5 or 6 years.
Well, you guys are amazing. I love being with you guys. You always teach and then meditate. And then we just kind of, it's just such a nice community. And you've grown this to be wonderful here in Colorado. Yeah. Very thankful. You're definitely like a mentor to so many people, you and your beautiful wife. As far as Maharishi, do you have a favorite memory while you were learning and training with him?
I'll tell you one thing, a lot of people don't know. He has wonderful, he's brilliant, obviously, but he's not what you would kind of visualize as a cave-dwelling monk. He was very personable, and he had a great sense of humor. I mean, he would have us just rolling on the floor with cosmic humor. So, yeah, I remember his patience. Oh my God. We would have these big meetings with a lot of meditators. It'd be last one I remember was in Amherst, University of Mass. There were over 2,000 meditators there. And people would get up and they'd ask the same question over and over again. And his patience was just amazing. He would just answer it in a different way than the last person who got up and asked the same question. So he had amazing patience, kindness, and he spent his whole life, he died about 8-9 years ago. He was 93, and he had spent his whole life, day and night, teaching TM. Actually, I saw an interview of him by a New York Times reporter about a few years before he died. And the reporter said, "Hey, I've talked to your staff. You have 3 separate sets of staff, because you work around the clock." They said, you only sleep 2 hours a day." So he laughed and he said, "They don't know what I do during those 2 hours."
That's a good point. You could only imagine that he should be sleeping, but hey.
Who knows what? I don't know.
That's very interesting and important.
Yeah, so that's
sure.
his sense of humor.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and it's and he set up the worldwide movement. He left somebody in charge, and we have an international movement, and then each international organization, and then each country has its own organization that coordinates through the international organization.
Well, that's what I love about TM too. It's that you can go to any country, any center, and meditate together, or go to their wherever it is in the world, which I love. So if you can, maybe we can close on how somebody can get involved with TM and learn TM.
Yes, the best way to do that is to start with our website, which is tm.org, www.tm.org. And that gives you can find, you mentioned famous people. There are all kinds of famous people. Ellen has a thing in there, all kinds of famous people. There, Tom Hanks and Jerry Seinfeld and so forth. Or science, if you want the science, there have been over 380 studies on TM published in scientific journals that show longevity from heart disease and so forth. Or you can find art. There's artists and musicians and so forth. Whatever interests you, can find that. And then there's a button you can push to get more information from a local teacher. And wherever you're living, watching this cast, that it will, if you push the button, it will send you to the teacher that you need to be sent to in the TM center in your area. It's really simple, and I think you'd really enjoy it. And there's some there's a really good 20-minute introductory talk by the head of the international organization, Dr. Tony Nader. He's an MD and a PhD, and but he talks down to earth. So it's really you'd enjoy it. It's really good.
Absolutely. It was one of the most lovely experiences. It was like a ceremony at the end as well. So beautiful. I felt so different after my 4 days of being with the TM teacher. Oh my gosh. And my life has changed. And I invited another friend of mine, a very, very, very successful man. He gifted me this, but I invited him, which was so funny. So it was a win-win. And still to this day, he says that he has gratitude towards me, in his gratitude book, maybe even once a day, once a week for sure, because he does the TM practice and it's changed his life. So.
Yes, it's a very important thing to do. It's so easy to do, and we teach children 10 years old and up to do it. So it can't be hard, or they wouldn't spend the time doing it. Yeah. And
it's beautiful.
Go from there. Now, one thing I did want to mention that we have over time developed an app, and the app is now being used for the 3 of the 4 days. So the first day is still personal instruction. Everything has to be taught one-on-one. So it's still personal instruction, but the other 3 can be done self-paced at home during the day. So each day represents a lesson, and they're just the same thing you would get if it was in person, but you can spend a little more time. You can go at your own pace, and that's really good. So we're really pleased that app is there. That's and awesome. Pretty soon we'll be able to open back up and have those in-person follow-ups that you came to.
Well, I can't wait
to see your face again.
Yes, I can't wait to see both you and your amazing wife. This has been such a lovely interview. I mean, truly, with all my heart, I love TM, and I'm so thankful that we were able to get you here as the brilliant mind you are, and bring forth this information. I'm so thankful and honored to have you on the show, and can't wait to see you. Thank you so much, Rusty. If there's anything else you'd like to say You're welcome.
No, except that it changed our life, and it's the most wonderful thing that you can add to your life to bring complete fulfillment to your life.
Absolutely. That was beautiful.
So thanks, Kimberly, for having me. I appreciate it so much. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye-bye.